The Jeff Younger Show is on. Dedicated to my sons, James and Jude. Howdy. This is a show for young men who want to reclaim what their grandfathers knew by instinct and what Rome and Athens taught by design. How to live as a man of worth in a world that despises masculine excellence. But before I explain what this show is really for, let me tell you what it's for in my life. I do this show because I have two sons, James and Jude. And the family court system doesn't allow me to visit them or call them. I'm their father, but the state has decided that my role in their lives is finished. My ex-wife transitioned one of my sons to a girl, and I fought that in court and lost in California. Obviously, I disagree with what's happening to my son, and I don't believe a father's duty ends just because some liberal judge in California signs an order. The Romans understood this concept called Pietas. It's duty to family and ancestors, and they understood it as the foundation of civilization. A Roman father passed down not just property, but wisdom, virtue, and a way of seeing the world, a way of understanding the world. And that transmission from father to son, generation to generation, and embodied practices, not just knowledge, but embodied practices, a kind of laying on of hands for the next generation. That's what builds lasting strength in a civilization. And when that chain breaks, everything else collapses. Look, I can't sit across a table from my sons. I can't take them camping. I can't train them in the gym. I can't teach them boxing like my father did. We can't go on long hikes and do survival camping the way I did as a boy and learn to be self-reliant. I can't walk them through the hard lessons that I'm supposed to teach, but I can do this. I can create a public record of what I would have taught them privately. And every episode of this show is a message in a bottle to James and Jude, who I love dearly, and to every other young man whose father was removed, who walked away, or who just never learned these things himself. Now, I get it. YouTube's not a replacement for fatherhood. I know. But look, it's the medium I have. That's all I got. So I'm going to use it to help my sons. This show is my way of fulfilling a duty that the state says I can't perform. If the family courts won't let me be a father in person, I'll be one in public. And if my sons ever want to know what their father believed, what he valued, and what he would have taught them about being men, it'll all be here, archived and accessible, no matter what any judge says. This is why the show focuses on broken systems, power dynamics, and how men are crushed by institutions that claim to help them. Now, I know this territory firsthand. I've lived it. And I'm not going to pretend it doesn't matter or that you can just move on from this. You can't do that. You have to fight, you have to adapt, or you just find another way. That's what the Romans did when the Republic fell. And that's what men do when the world doesn't cooperate. So that's what I'm doing. So yes, this show is for young men generally. And frankly, I spend almost all my private time advocating for young men, fighting for your ability to own affordable homes, fighting for you to get out of the student loan abuse that is preventing family formation, reforming family law so you actually have rights to your children. I basically have spent my whole life advocating for young men in the law and the legislature and in the public sphere. But this channel didn't start for you. It didn't start for young men in general, okay? It's really a father's message to his sons. So everything I teach here is what I would actually teach my sons if I could. That's a high standard, right? I'm going to believe everything I say. You can disagree with me, but what you can't disagree with is my sincerity in saying it. I'm not giving you a load of bullshit. I'm not trying to sell you some stupid courses. I'm not giving you some shortcut way to alpha masculinity or whatever. This is about helping my sons enter into a world that's going to be very different than the one I grew up in, a world that hates men and hates masculinity. And that's the heart of this show. But let me take some time and tell you what I think you might get out of it as I talk to my sons. First of all, you have a lot in common with my sons. You need to understand how the world actually works. Not how the schools told you it works, not how some crazy constitutional conservatives tell you the government works, not some idealist leftist telling you about how international relations works, how the world actually works. Now, I'm a Gen X man, and I started fighting the boomer establishment in like 1989. Okay. I consider myself the OG of the fight against the boomer establishment. And I've watched patterns over the years that people have tried to resist this system and try to accommodate the system, try to adapt themselves to the system. And I've seen patterns repeat. I've seen institutions fail. And I've seen lies get repackaged for each new generation. And I've seen every generation since then fall for them. So this show is me passing on what I've learned the hard way. Okay, I'm not passing as some guru or some movement leader. I don't believe in these movements. I don't think we should organize as movements, as a matter of fact, and I'll explain why that is in a later episode. I'm just talking to you as someone who's been in this arena long enough to see what's real and what's just bullshit. Now, the Romans called what I'm talking about virtues. The Greeks called it arete, and it's just being excellent at seeing the world for what it really is and being able to adapt yourself to it and succeed. I'm going to use the word throughout these videos, the word flourishing, which means to be able to succeed and achieve a meaningful, happy life, right? And this is going to require understanding real power. How can you build competence? How do you not get crushed by these systems that are actually designed to break you as a young man? This show exists to give you that information that I wish somebody had given me in 1989. And it's the information that I want to pass on to my sons. So if you're here with me, I'm taking the same care with you that I would with my own flesh and blood. Who is the show actually for? Young men who sense that something is totally broken. And maybe you don't have a language or framework to understand what or why. Maybe you're following some guru who's telling you what to do and how to think about things. These are men who know something's not quite right about that. People need to be teaching you how to think for yourself about these things, not telling you what to think. I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm going to teach you how to think about things and come to your own conclusions about how you need to pursue your life. Now, there are men out there who were told that their own masculine essence, their strength, their courage, their natural competitiveness, they've been told that this is toxic, that their very strength, the fact that they're a man and strong, is itself something suspect and dangerous, and we have to worry about it. And that somehow loyalty to your own people, even loyalty to your own family, your own nation, is somehow immoral. Right? If you're one of these people, if you're tired of being gaslit by this culture that celebrates weakness, punishes competence, well, you're right in my wheelhouse. If you want to understand how power actually operates, not how you wish it worked, not how it works on paper, this is the channel for you. If you're ready to adopt a framework that lets you think about the world in your own terms, not to be told what to think. A lot of people want to tune into some YouTube channel and find, what should I think about the latest current events? I'm not going to do that. But I am going to help you think it through for yourself. And because of that, I'm going to use a Socratic method where I ask questions and then I answer them. Pay attention to what questions I'm asking. The questions I'm asking are almost more important than the answers, because the questions show you what's significant and important to think about. And over time, you'll pick up on the patterns of that. If you're ready to reject the global marketplace of lukewarm opinions, which is what social media has basically become, if you're ready to leave the outrage machine, if you've graduated past the point when you want to log onto a Twitch stream and watch some people prank people, if you've matured beyond that and you're ready to think clearly about what actually matters, you're going to like this show. Again, I'm not a guru. I'm not even really a teacher. I don't even know if you would even call me a coach, right? I'm just a guy telling you what's gone wrong and what's worked for me. And you might as well take that knowledge so that you can seize power and rule in the future. That's what I want young men to do. So I'm not here to give you permission. I'm not even here to build a brotherhood or a clan. I'm just not into that stuff. First of all, I'm not temperamentally suited for that kind of stuff, okay? I'm not asking you for money. I'll never do that. I'm not asking you to join some community of people you're going to meet online that you've never even met. I'm not going to do any of this stuff. I'm here to share information that will help you see what's really going on. And I'm going to tell you to go out into the real world and do some things that will allow you to test what I'm saying. What makes this show different? Notice the questions I'm asking. What makes this show different? Well, most other shows are peddling what I consider to be empty self-help or academic theory, a lot of times academic theology. And I think all of those essentially lead nowhere. We're not going to do any of this stuff. This show operates from three principles. Three principles. And you need to keep these in mind when I talk about things. The first one is Paleo Futurism. The second one is offensive realism. And the third is nationalism. And I'm going to break those down so that you'll be able to interpret clearly the things I'm talking about. Paleo Futurism basically means we're not going to LARP. We're not going to try to recreate the Roman legion or the Spartan. We're not going to advocate for some boot camp experience that you should have had. We're not going to pretend that the world is the 1950s, and I'm not going to tell you to live that way, okay? What we are going to do is extract timeless principles from ancient civilizations, the ones that worked and stood the test of time for thousands of years. This is the stuff that actually made men formidable in the world. And I'll tell you, I brought the Texas government to its knees. I brought the federal government into line on several important political issues around protecting children from transgender medicine, so-called transgender medicine. I've shut down gender clinics in this state. Okay. I've participated in criminal actions against people who have harmed children. Okay. So if you come to Texas and you talk to people, they call me the bear here in Texas because I am a formidable son of a bitch. If you try to hurt children, it's not going to go well for you here in Texas. And I'm going to show you how you can be formidable like that in a system that's designed to hate. Because let me tell you something, I had to fight the entire system from the president all the way down when Biden was president. And I literally went against every government agency in the state of Texas, including judges, repeatedly went against judges. So we're going to look at stuff that actually makes you formidable so you can do stuff like that if you want to. And we're going to take these values from these ancient civilizations, we're going to project it forward into the modern world. We're not going to LARP the social forms of the Romans. We're not going to LARP the social forms of the ancient Greeks. We're not going to LARP the social forms of colonial America or 1800s America or the 1950s. We're moving into an inevitable ultra-science future, whether you like it or not. AI is coming. Artificial wombs are coming. There's tremendously revolutionary technologies that are just around the corner and that are going to happen in your lifetime as a young man. It's going to make your world totally different than mine. In the way the internet revolutionized the world, in your day, social media revolutionized the world. In the future, it'll be reproductive technologies and AI that will revolutionize the world. So we have to project values from our times, the virtues that we advocate that make men strong and formidable, and project them into that ultra science future in the social forms of the future. Our goal is not to preserve useless social forms that can't exist anymore. This is a kind of education process. So in a way, there's some teaching going on here. The Greeks understood this in a different way, though. They called education paideia, the formation of character through deliberate education and discipline. The Romans understood that this produced something they called gravitas. This is the weight that a serious and formidable man carries when he walks in the room. If you've never experienced walking into a room and everybody goes silent and wants to listen to you, when you get through a number of my videos, you get around video number 12, you're going to have that gravitas. I'm going to teach you how to have that gravitas so people will listen to you. I'm going to show you how to talk to older men. I'm going to show you how to talk to younger men. I'm going to tell you how to talk to rich people and poor people. I'm going to teach you how to be taken seriously because I had to go through this problem as a Gen Xer. I come out of this punk rock generation, this post-punk generation, and I worked in industries where I just was not taken seriously for a long time. Fortunately, my intellect was sufficient that I could outperform my peers, and so they had to take me seriously. But I learned the hard way that there are social markers and social cues that you need to pick up on that can make the difference for you. And we're going to take all these principles, and those are ancient principles, though. The Romans taught these ideas. We're going to show you how they work in 2025. That's what Paleo Futurism is about. Offensive realism is a principle that says we will deal with the world as it is and not as we wish it were. Power is real, and it's what determines the structures of the world around us, not political systems, but actual power. What is power? Power is simply the ability to impose your will on other people. Sometimes that can only be done by violence. Sometimes it can be done through persuasion. Sometimes it can be done through subterfuge. Sometimes it has to be done through mob action. There's many ways to talk about how power is exercised, and we'll get into all of them. Hierarchy is real. You know, a man generally, when he walks into a room, he can see the hierarchy in the room and knows exactly where he is. And if he wants to move down in the hierarchy, nobody's going to stop him. If he wants to move up in the hierarchy, he's going to face significant competition. We're going to talk about how you need to compete with power when you want to move up the hierarchy. Although I got to tell you, a lot of times the struggle to move up the hierarchy is futile and useless. Sometimes you can look at people at the top of a hierarchy and go, I don't want to be that guy. I want him to take all the risks. That's another form of power, getting other people to take the risks for things that you want. We'll talk about all this kind of stuff. The reality is, in the real world, the strong dominate the weak unless the weak organize, train, and develop a capacity to resist. We're not going to moralize about this on this channel. You may not like that, what I just said, but we're going to just understand it as a fact and just use it. Thucydides knew this, Machiavelli knew this, and you need to know it too. The third principle is nationalism. And that just simply means loyalty to your own, your kin, your culture, your civilization. The Roman concept of Pietas, what came to be called piety in English, it wasn't a sentimental idea or just a purely spiritual idea. It was a hard-edged duty that you owed to your family, your ancestors, and to your state. And the Greek understood that the city, the polis, the citizenship meant obligation, not just rights. In the modern world, we talk about rights as floating abstractions with no duties. The ancient world understood that rights were just two sides of the same coin. There's a right, you have a duty to accomplish something in your society, and you needed rights concomitant with that duty to be able to accomplish the duty. And it was understood that it would be immoral to give someone a duty when they didn't have a corresponding right to accomplish it. And in fact, in ancient law, that was absolute defense against punishment for any crime. If you didn't have the right to do it, then you can't be held accountable for doing it. So we're going to look at this idea of duty and love for your clan, your family, your culture, your nation. And that's the framework that I use when analyzing politics and culture. I don't get into abstractions about humanity or global markets. There's no such thing as a global market. Markets are all national. We'll talk about the reason that national economy is the right way to understand commerce and finance, not free markets. We will emphasize concrete loyalty to the people and places that actually matter in your life. Now, why are we focusing so much on ancient Greece and Rome specifically? There's a lot of ancient cultures we could pick. Why is that? Well, for a couple of reasons. One, they produced generations of men who built civilizations that lasted thousands of years. They defeated overwhelming odds. They established principles of governance, virtue, and power that we still use today. Honestly, if you want to learn about politics, you just still go read Thucydides and you basically have learned everything you need to know. Consider the Greek concept of excellence. It's not just virtue in the soft modern sense. Virtues in the modern world have just become like a moral, tell the truth or something like that. That's not what I mean by virtue. That's not what the ancients meant by virtue. It meant to fulfill one's function excellently. It meant the full development of your capacities as a man. Physical courage, intellectual clarity, civic duty, aesthetic refinement, not loving base things. You were a complete package if you were an excellent man. You weren't one-dimensional You weren't just playing video games, and you weren't just a sports jock, and you weren't just some talking head talking about academic theology or philosophy on the internet, okay? You were a complete person. And the total development of such a person, the Greeks meant by excellence. You could also look at the Roman concept of virtue. It literally comes from verb, which means man. It meant manly. It meant to be virtuous was to be manly. Courage in battle, discipline in life, loyalty to the state, dignity in your bearing. How many people have ever talked to you about how to carry yourself with dignity and gravitas? I'm telling you, man, anybody that hasn't talked to you about that kind of stuff, they have no idea about how to make you into a man that people will take seriously. You know, Roman patrician, he wasn't just a wealthy dude. He carried himself in a certain way that earned authority. That's what we call voluntary obedience. All right. And that's what we're after. These are not feel-good abstractions. Okay. They weren't operating like some system of cultures written down on paper and they had some theory, anthropological theory, and all this shit. They weren't doing that. These legal, political frameworks that we're going to talk about evolved because they worked, and they'll work today. And if you want to understand power and excellence, we're going to go to the source code. We're basically going to run git, go back to the main branch, and we're going to read the original source code about how that works. Well, what will you actually learn from this show? Well, you're going to get concrete and actionable frameworks for living as a man in a society that hates you. And it's going to be organized into tracks that will help you sort of categorize the information. And this is based on the kind of questions that I thought when I was a young man in 1989, how would I have wanted this information organized for me? The first one is flourishing. How can you live well in a system that hates you? But this is not self-help bullshit. It's classical understanding of human flourishing through virtue. Now, Aristotle talks a lot about this. And let me just tell you, the ancients never said follow your passions. In fact, they considered that a terrible vice, a terrible thing to tell children. In some Greek societies, if you told children to follow their passions, you'd be executed for misleading the young. But when Aristotle talked about this, he said to develop practical wisdom. He meant master your sensual appetites. Don't be a slave to your sensual appetites. Okay? Don't be a slave to fucking. Don't be a slave to eating. Don't be a slave to video games. Don't be a slave to anything. Put it under your conscious control. First thing. Second thing is to cultivate courage. If you don't have courage, you're not going to do the right thing. Simple as that. You can't do the right thing when it's hard if you don't have courage. And finally, once you have courage, you build habits that consistently produce good results. And that's ultimately what aligns with excellence. Now, I'm going to cover discipline, physical training, mental clarity, financial competence, personal moral order. But all of it is really wrapped up in this Greek idea of a sound mind and a strong body directed by a will that serves something greater than pleasure. The second track of information is about power. It's how influence in the world is actually gained, kept, and lost. Our main sources here will be Thucydides, Polybius, and Machiavelli. We'll also look at some modern thinkers on this. We're going to look at people who actually did stuff. So you'll learn how to read those histories as we go. I'm going to teach you how to read them. You'll also learn how to read hierarchies in the world, how to identify real versus symbolic authority, and understand why democracies collapse and empires rise. The Roman Senate didn't fall because of values, quote unquote. It fell because armed men with loyal legions decided that votes didn't matter anymore. There's an old Roman maxim: don't quote laws to men with swords. Ultimately, you have to understand power or you're going to be crushed by it. The third track is quotes. Now, one thing that my father taught me that has stuck with me and it's been very valuable is I've kept a commonplace book my whole life. So I have quotes that I've written down from great books. And you can see behind me, I've read a lot of books. And those quotes serve as kind of an index for me for thinking about things. So I'm going to build one online for you. And what we'll do is we'll take aphorisms from ancient sources, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, Plutarch, and other thinkers like Joseph de Maistre, even Carl Schmitt, and political thinkers. And we'll unpack the deeper architecture beneath them. These will be done as shorts, and there'll be a lot of them. A Stoic maxim is not just something that's done for your inspiration. It's a compressed operating system for navigating chaos. Okay? And most of you don't know how to read these things anymore. You've lost the ability to read the way ancient peoples did. So I'm going to decode it for you and make it usable. And in other episodes, I'm going to teach you how to read properly so that you can do it yourself and you don't need to come to my videos. The next track is politics. I'm not going to use politics really to advocate for a platform. We're going to look at what's really happening and what men can do about it. It's not punditry, okay? It's not some kind of partisan thing. What we're going to do is analyze political events from a realist and historical pattern recognition standpoint. How do regimes actually change? What makes populations comply or rebel? Why do some leaders command loyalty and others collapse? And I'm going to look at modern events through ancient lenses and show you that the mechanisms underneath the narrative are actually pretty simple. And so my goal here is to teach you how to analyze political events rather than to tell you what to think about those political events. That's why it's not really punditry. Another track that I don't think any other channel has, and I think it's super important, is I'm going to show you all the false paths that I took. I've had cultural delusions. I've fallen into ideological traps. I've fallen into counterfeit virtues. I've fallen in with the wrong crowd. Okay, I got the scars to prove that. The modern world is just full of these snares. And frankly, I think going forward, young men are going to face, my sons and you are going to face a world with a lot more traps than I had. So it's really important for you, when I put out false path videos, you need to go to those first. Because I'm going to cover these false paths and these traps and show you how, in a lot of cases, they're trying to convince you that weakness is a form of enlightenment. They're going to try to teach you that a kind of sterile, puerile way of thinking, a puerile mind, is a form of freedom. I'm going to break this down and show you what's actually going on. Okay, the Greek word for this means falsehood, but it captures an idea of a falsehood that leads you into a false understanding of what's real. And that causes you to stumble. Okay? I'm going to help you identify these false paths, and I'm going to, more importantly, try to help you see how to identify false paths. So when these new things open up in the future that maybe I can't even imagine right now, that you're going to live through, you'll be able to identify new kinds of traps. And finally, we're going to look at current events. These are short form analysis that will decode the news through these realist and national lenses. And it will help you start developing pattern recognition about what offensive realism really is and how power really works. It's just clear-eyed assessment. It's not taken aside. You may ask at this point, is this a political show? Well, on the classical understanding, politics flows from philosophy. In fact, politics is first philosophy, according to the ancients, because men are never born in a state of nature. That's one of the big problems of the Enlightenment philosophers. They all start with man in a state of nature. Hobbes concludes that man in a state of nature lives a nasty, brutish, and short life. It's a war of one man against all men. Locke concludes that men in a state of nature are by nature all free. So concludes that man in a state of nature is by nature equal to all other men. So they all emphasize equality, freedom, and the brutish nature of men without laws. All of that's wrong and useless to even think about, because men are never born into a state of nature. You're never in a state of nature. Men are born into small communities called families, okay? And families live in a wider society where they cooperate with others. So in a very real sense, politics is first philosophy. It's the first philosophy that you encounter in your life. How do I live well with other people? You start off with just your family, your mother and father, then your siblings, then your extended family, and then your extended community. In fact, you could probably say that being a mature person is when your political philosophy extends to the nation. So yeah, this show is political in that sense, but not in the way that the news is political or political parties are political. We don't care about elections. They're just popularity contests. And I'm going to argue to you that your vote doesn't really matter. But we do care about power, who has it, how they got it, how they use it, what systems create or destroy it. As I said, the Roman Republic didn't die because of bad policy. It died because competing factions realized that controlling armies mattered more than winning votes. And that's a political lesson that it's hard for a lot of Americans to get their head around. But it's also a lesson about human nature, about incentive structures, and what happens when institutions lose legitimacy. And my claim is going to be you're living in a time when almost all institutions are losing legitimacy. If you look at what the boomers have done to you and what they did to me, we were the first, Gen X was the first generation to suffer the effects of boomer politics. And I think a lot of Gen Z guys, a lot of millennial guys don't understand that the dispossessed people of the 1980s and early 90s, these Gen X people that I belong to, we were dispossessed long before you were, man. I mean, they came for our jobs. They put us out of jobs. They put us out of the house. They made it almost impossible for us to flourish in the United States, okay? We'll look at, in that sense, it's political, right? We'll look at generational politics, but I'm going to do it in a way that helps you think about it. Okay, you'll learn to think like Polybius when you're analyzing the rise and fall of regimes. You're not going to react like a pundit that's seeking clicks on the news cycle, right? That's the difference between understanding politics and being manipulated by it. And I'm going to help you see the difference and not be manipulated. Some people out there may be saying, hey, younger, why are you spending so much time on nationalism and why do you even emphasize it? I'm just going to break it down, man. Loyalty is the foundation of everything in life that matters. Without loyalty, you just have nothing. The Greeks understood this very well. The Greek city-state was not an administrative unit. It was not an economic zone, okay? It was a brotherhood of citizens that were bound by blood, culture, shared sacrifice, and common destiny. Every summer, Greek citizens of the cities went out and fought wars together, and they lived and died together. You fought for Athens or Sparta not because of some abstract principles. There's no civic nationalist principles that tied you to Athens or Sparta, right? You did it because your ancestors built these things, because your family lived there, and your sons would inherit it. And this idea of posterity, leaving something for your sons, is the main reason that has motivated men throughout the ages. Again, I've talked to you about the Roman concept of duty. It was both duty to God, to your ancestors, to your family, to the state. It was a glue that held the empire together. And it did this for a millennia. Soldiers didn't volunteer for the legions and die for Roman values. They didn't die for some abstract moral system. They died for Rome, the place where their mothers and fathers lived, where their children would inherit their lands, and where their name would be remembered at the family hearth in glory forever. Now, compare that to globalism. It's just loyalty to nothing. It's looking on your nation as just an economic zone. It's just your nation's just a market where you sell things to. People that you exploit commercially. Citizenship, what's that? That's just where I currently live and engage in commercial transactions. Culture and love of the natural human instinct to love your people just reduced into consumption. And the result is a generation of men that have no roots, they have no duties, and no reason to sacrifice. I'm going to submit to you that that is exactly the view that the billionaire class in the Western nations has. They have no loyalty to you at all, and they would be happy to sacrifice you to anything for money. And we're going to reject that entirely, and we're going to look at ways that you can stay out of that trap, stay out of the maws of these evil billionaires that run the world. Now, some people are concerned that nationalism might breed hate, but here's the deal. Nationalism is not about hating outsiders. It's just a stupid idea. You love your family, don't you? I love my family. That doesn't mean I hate other people's families. In fact, my capacity to love my family gives me empathy for another father who loves his family. That empathy makes me treat him well. Nationalism is the only way you can treat people well. You have to love your own or you can't love others. And that's the political order that produces greatness. I'm going to also argue that nationalism is the most powerful force on the planet. It's more powerful than technology forces. It's more powerful than economic forces. It's more powerful than even military power. One of the things you can think about is the Afghanistan war. You had 7 of the most powerful, technologically powerful militaries in Afghanistan for 20 years. And you're facing an adversary that had a 1970s AK-47. He would run across the Pakistan border barefoot with 30 rounds. He would use those 30 rounds as good as he could, and then he would run back before sundown. All he had was a gun, a belief in God, and love of his people. And he defeated 7 of the most technologically sophisticated militaries in the world. That's what I mean by nationalism being the most powerful force in the world. Napoleon talked a lot about this. He said that fighting spirit counts 5 times and technology and military power only counts 3 times. Okay, nationalism, love of your people, is the most powerful force on the planet. You need to learn how to cultivate it. Now, some people don't like the term offensive realism. It sounds like I'm advocating for war, but it's actually not. It's just a school of thought, well studied. It's a school of thought in international relations. You can go Google it, and it applies to all forms of human competition. The core insight of offensive realism is that the international system is anarchic. That means there's no world government, there's no sovereign, there's no international sovereign. Therefore, states have to compete for power because their security is never guaranteed. They can't go to the police. There's nobody to go to. So the strong dominate the weak unless the weak develop the strength to resist. We're just looking at the world as it really is. It's accurate. Thucydides documented it in the Peloponnesian War. If you want a good introduction to this idea, read the Melian Dialogue. It's the clearest expression. There's a great quote from the Melian Dialogue. The strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. I mean, it sounds cruel. It's not cruel. It's really just physics. It's just a fact of the world. Power's real. Denying it doesn't make power go away. And it doesn't make you moral to deny power exists. It's just going to make you pray for the strong. And I claim that this applies at every level. In this sense, I disagree with the international theorists. I don't think an anarchic situation with no higher sovereign means that we can't have offensive realism in a situation where we do have a sovereign. Power just plays out the same way by different rules. Now, I'm not talking about in your career, perhaps in your family, your community, your nation, and your governments. Men who understand power can navigate it, and men who pretend it doesn't exist just get crushed by it. Okay? We study power not to worship it, but to wield it wisely and to protect ourselves from it. That's the purpose of studying power. Well, I've heard some people say, well, okay, how does Paleo Futurism actually work? I mean, it sounds like an interesting idea, but I can't get my head around it. Let me give you an example. Take the Roman household, the domus, where we get the word domicile. It was not a nuclear family in the modern sense. It was actually a multi-generational economic and political unit. The Romans called it the paterfamilias, the father of the family. He had legal authority over his family like a king. He had legal authority as a king over his own family. But he also carried the weight of all the responsibility. So, for example, if his wife committed a crime, he could be punished for it. If his children committed a crime, he could be punished for it. So the father managed the resources, made the strategic decisions, he arranged marriages, mediated disputes, ensured the family line continued with honor and all their resources intact. Now, we're not going to be able to go back to Roman law. Remember, we're not going to LARP. We're not going to be like these tradcons and pretend like we can go back to some previous social order. But the principle is this: strong families are economic and political units, not just emotional support units. Let me say that again. Strong families are economic and political units, not just emotional support systems. A man who thinks multi-generationally, who plans for his sons and grandsons, who builds wealth and reputation that will outlast him, that man is a paleo-futurist. If he can do that in the modern world using the modern social structures, that man is a paleofuturist because he has projected ancient values into the inevitable ultrascience future. What does this mean practically? Well, first thing is stop thinking like an individual consumer. All this bullshit that you've been taught about free markets and utility maximizers and rational actors, it's all bullshit. You need to start thinking like a clan patriarch. And you're going to say, Jeff, I don't have a clan. I'm all by myself. You know, there's another guy that was all by himself. His name was Khan's family was murdered by a rival clan. So Genghis Khan was totally a literate boy. He killed a person and took his sword. And in his mind, he circumscribed the world as far as his sword could reach. And he said, that's my kingdom. And my only goal now is to get other men with swords and make it bigger. Okay, Genghis Khan started alone, so can you. But you have to stop thinking like you're a consumer. You have to start building loyalty between men. Okay? Not on the basis of getting something from each other. What Aristotle called true friendship. You have to build true friendships. You have to then, from those true friendships, you need to create systems that are going to survive your death. I hate to break it to you, man. And a lot of people are not going to tell you this. It's a hard thing for young men, especially. You ain't the central character in the story of the world. Napoleon wasn't the center character of the story of the world. Neither was Genghis Khan. Neither was Alexander. They all found out they weren't. You know, one of my favorite sayings my father taught me from Montaigne, he said, upon the highest throne in the world, a king is still sitting on his ass. All right? You ain't the main character. Okay? So you're going to die one day. You only got about 100 years here. And of that 100 years, only 30 of them are going to be really productive. You can't get shit done in 30 years, okay? You can do some important things, but you need to think about how your sons will do in their 30 years and their sons will do in their 30 years. All right? That's ancient wisdom that you can take into the future. Consider the Greek gymnasium. Now, you think of a gym as a place where you go bodybuild and look good for the girls, right? I'm going to try to convince you that's the wrong kind of fitness goal to have. But leave that aside. The Greek gymnasium was not just a place to lift weights or get fit or to participate in sport. It was a place where you went to get fit for battle. And it was a place where boys became men through physical training. Philosophical discussions also occurred in the gymnasium. And also competitions, wrestling, boxing, all kinds of throwing things, all kinds of competitions. And those competitions were held under the eyes of older men who had pattern recognition and had fought many wars, who could help guide these young men in their training and in their thinking. That's what I mean by education. It's character formation through deliberate practice. Can you create that kind of gymnasium environment in the modern world? Probably not. But here's what you can do. You can create modern versions. You can have a group that you train with that also does a reading program and discussion. You can have a council where younger guys can learn from older guys. You can bring strength to your intellect. It's not enough to be smart, man. If you can't throw punches, your intellect's useless. If you can't accomplish things, your intellect's useless. Right? You need competition that's balanced by brotherhood. Competition should make the tribe stronger, not weaker. So if you've got competitiveness that's weakening the tribe, it's wrong. You have to get rid of it. You have to learn how to compete the right way, okay? That means bringing that into the modern world. We're going to compete better making open source software so that we can have censorship-free social networks. We're going to compete better in preparing rhetoric techniques that we can use on social media to further our political message in our county. Right? That kind of competitiveness is being pushed into this is the Greek idea of the gymnasium being pushed into the modern world where conflicts happen in a different way. That's what paleofuturism is. So I've given you two good examples. I hope that helps you get your head around it. And some of you who may be libertarians or maybe some liberals, you may be out there saying, oh, those Greeks and Romans, they were built on slavery. How dare you look back to them? Look, every civilization before the Industrial Revolution was built on some form of slavery. And that's just a historical fact. I'm not endorsing slavery. I'm just saying that's a fact. We're extracting principles, though, of masculine virtue, political order, strategic thinking. And we're not trying to replicate ancient systems. I told you this is Paleo Futurism. Okay. It's not paleo in the sense that it tries to recreate a past social system that can't exist. It's a futurist outlook. Okay. So when I reference Roman virtue or Greek excellence, I'm talking about ideas of courage, self-mastery, civic duty. And those principles will work whether you're a citizen of Rome, a 19th century American farmer, or a 21st century knowledge worker. This is what paleofuturism means. We're not romanticizing the past. We're not pretending ancient societies were perfect. We're not even trying to emulate their social structures. What we're identifying is what worked for them. And then how do we make that work for us in the same way in the modern world? Is this show religious? Again, pay very close attention to the questions I ask. They're more important than the answers. You should be learning patterns of how to think about things by looking at the questions that I ask. Is this show religious? No, it is not religious. It is philosophical and civilizational. Now, I respect Christianity's role in Western history. I myself am an Orthodox Christian. But this show operates from a position of realism and not theology. We ask what actually works, what produces strong men, stable families, enduring civilizations. The Greeks and Romans answered those questions through hard learning in the real world, and those answers still hold. That is not to say that religion isn't important. We're going to talk about how religion fits into nationalism and why religious beliefs essentially define what a culture is. It's not really possible to have a culture without a religion. So if you're Christian, you're going to love this show. If you're not a Christian, great. You're going to find nothing here that will contradict masculine virtue in any way. You're going to find nothing here that is going to force any kind of religious dogma on you. In fact, you're going to find some new ways to think about Christianity and religion that I think will help you make peace with it, even if you don't accept it. If you're not Christian, you'll find a framework that just doesn't require religious belief, but will still be useful to you. But you should know I'm an Orthodox Christian. I make no apologies about that. And occasionally, I'll explain to you why I'm an Orthodox Christian and why I think you should be too. You should listen to those, not because they're evangelical or I'm trying to get you to be a Christian, but because it's really not possible to have a nation and a culture without a religion. What is the ultimate goal of this show? Pretty simple. I'm going to give you information that you can use. That's it. That's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm not here to do. I'm not going to bullshit you. I'm not here to forge a generation. I'm not here to build a movement. I'm here to share what I've learned in 35 years of fighting the exact same systems that are crushing you right now. The family courts, the corporate HR departments, the academic institutions, the media apparatus. Man, I've fought them all. I've been dealing with them since 1989. And believe me, the playbook has not changed. There's nothing new here. Only the mechanisms of executing the playbook have changed, but the actual strategies have not changed. The lies and propaganda, I will say, are more sophisticated, but the principles behind them are exactly the same. So, how do I say this? The Greeks kind of had a concept of kalos kagath. And if I had to translate it, this is not a great translation of it, but for my purposes here, this will work. It means the beautiful and the good mind, the good man. Your outer bearing, the way you relate to the world, should reflect your inner excellence. Strong, disciplined, intelligent, loyal, courageous men, that's a great ideal. But my goal with this show is actually much simpler than that. It's just to help you see clearly what's actually happening. To help you understand how power really works, man. So that you don't get crushed by a system that's been designed to break you. I've been able to avoid it. I've had the entire government of the state of Texas turn against me. The entire judiciary of the state of Texas turned against me and tried to destroy me. I've had entire media organizations turn against me and try to destroy me. I faced giant Antifa riots. 400 people tried to kill me at a university in Texas. So, look, I've been through the ringer here, and you should be able to learn from me, not to make some of the mistakes I made. And in some cases where I made achievements, I think I can get you to achieve even more than I did. I'm not here to try to save Western civilization. I'm so sick of these damn channels, these damn gurus saying this stuff. I'm here to save Western civilization. I'm going to turn you into an alpha male. I'm going to make you into a powerful person. You're going to get rich. You're going to do fuck all that. I'm not here to do any of that shit. The bottom line is you have to figure that shit out yourself, and nobody can tell you how to do it, okay? If somebody is telling you how to do it, they didn't do it because they wouldn't tell you how to do it. They wouldn't make a competitor. Just think about it, man. Use some common sense. What you can do is learn from me, start where my shoulders are instead of at the bottom, stand on my shoulders and go higher than me. You can save yourself. You can build something real for yourself. If you can help a few other guys along the way that you love and trust, that's enough, man. You don't have to save Western civilization. Save yourself and you'll save 100 people around you. And frankly, just saving yourself is more than most people can manage. Like, get off of this saving Western civilization bullshit. That's all Brandeis, his heroic shit. You know, we have to be realists, hardcore realists. We can't have this kind of idealistic bullshit that we base our lives on. So if I had to just sum it up, I'd say this. This show is just one Gen X man passing on hard-won information to younger men who are facing the same fights and are actually, I think, going to face a tougher fight than I had as a Gen X man. And if my show helps you make better decisions, if it helps you avoid traps, build something that lasts that you can pass on, then, you know, this show has worked. What should you do after listening to my shows? Okay, this is very simple. Get out of your fucking house and go do something. Knowledge without action is just cowardice. Their effects in the world are exactly the same. Okay? Stop intellectualizing shit. Okay? When you learn something, go apply it. Go make something with it. Start with the basics. We'll go through a sequence of about 12 videos, and then after that, we'll start talking about some physical training stuff. One of the things you may not know about me, I've practiced weapons combat all my life. I was a hand-to-hand weapons instructor in the military. I've fought actual duels with blades in countries all over the world, and I have the scars on my body to prove that. I still do weapons training, and I'm going to convince you that there's a different way of thinking about training that isn't bodybuilding, okay? But we're going to talk about training your body, and we're going to talk about the mental training that goes along with training your body. I'm going to ask you to master a skill. I don't really give a shit what it is. Could be pottery, could be plumbing, could be welding, could be writing, could be making YouTube videos. A skill in the world that people understand as exhibiting a kind of personal excellence. A lot of skills that you can get, your community will not understand as a form of excellence. So it's not just any old skill. I'm going to ask you to read some things. So you should get off my video when you're done and just go read the stuff that I told you to read. And this is not like social media shit. I'm not going to give you some posts to go look at. Like most of these guys, they go, oh, go to my social media page. Let me get some clicks from you. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you where to go online to read stuff for free. And you need to click over from my channel. I know I'm losing you. I'm losing clicks. Oh, yeah, cry me a river. I don't give a shit about that. I want you to go read what I tell you to. We're going to start with Plutarch's Lives probably. And I won't be making those recommendations again until after about 12 videos. I'm going to ask you to go build a network. I'm going to ask you to find men that are worth following and men that are worth leading. I'm going to convince you that there's no distinction between a good leader and a good follower. If you're not a good follower, you are not a fucking good leader. And if you're a good leader, you will be a good follower. And that's how loyalty is built, mutual leadership and mutual followership. I'm going to ask you to go build that network. I'm going to ask you to do a minimum of 3 people. I'm asking you to create some margin for yourself, create some alpha for yourself. I'm going to tell you that you need to get out of bad debt and start using good debt. I'm going to tell you how to save and why you shouldn't save the way most people are telling you to. I'm going to teach you why you should never be paid for your time. And I'm going to teach you how to get autonomy in a system that wants to make you a wage slave. Okay. You don't need permission from me to do these things. You don't need to wait for the videos. You can go try all this stuff right now when you get off this video. I would actually like that even more if you just went and figured it out for yourself. You don't need my permission. You don't need anybody's permission. You don't need to wait for conditions to improve. Oh, the economy's so bad, I can't do anything. No, bullshit. You need to start now. All you got is now. You know, Rome wasn't built by men who looked at this muddy hill and said, hey, that's not a good place to build, you know? Rome went and conquered their neighbors, took their women, and started Rome. They didn't give a shit what time it was. I'm not saying that you're going to go build an empire. We got to be realistic, right? But dude, you can build something that lasts. But you got to start now. Start today. That's the Roman way. That's the only way. Well, the Jeff Younger Show is just my perspective on how the world actually works based on 35 years of fighting the same establishment that's coming for you now. I'm not selling you transformation. I'm not promising to save the West. I'm giving you information about how power operates, what the system really does versus what it claims to do, and what I've learned that works when everything fails. When it all goes to shit, what works? Every episode is designed to show you something that you weren't seeing before, or to give you the language to think about something that you sort of knew was happening, but you couldn't quite articulate. We're going to take what's useful, ignore what's not. But at the very least, you'll have a framework and the information and the language to think about problems for yourself. The future belongs to men like that. Men who will see for themselves clearly and act according to virtue and excellence. And that's just really all I'm offering you in my channel. I'm offering a clear vision based on hard experience. Welcome to the Jeff Younger Show. The Jeff Younger Show, signing off.